I'm Nicole from the Malaysia. So let me start. Nicole, can you tell me a little bit about your background and the work that you do?
Hi, morning everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So yeah, I'm Nicole. My pronouns are they, she. I'm a human rights researcher and a climate activist. And I'm kind of working on the intersections of like climate justice, LGBTQ rights, and feminist economics. And ultimately, I'm working towards campaigning for Malaysia and also every country, but Malaysia, since I'm in Malaysia, to declare climate emergency so that we can take, real, meaningful climate action. Maybe to like give an example of the work I do, because I feel like it's like too abstract. So for example, right now I'm working on a human rights research on statelessness in Malaysia, and I'm also working on like an article on the human impacts, like in terms of health and economy, like the impacts of coal-fired power plants in Malaysia and how that affects like communities who live near the coal-fired power plants, because we are using a lot of coal in Malaysia. And I'm also a campaigner with Lima Action Malaysia, which is a grassroots climate justice movement in Malaysia. We center and try and empower like frontline and vulnerable communities who are most impacted in the climate crisis and try to push for them to be at the center. So meaning like indigenous communities, Orang Asli, Orang Asal, youth and women. And maybe just to give an example of like what Climate Action Malaysia does, like for example at COP26, we organized an arts exhibition and documentary that was led. It's called Weaving Hopes for the Future. And it's basically a project that was led by these youth indigenous women. And they created like this documentary and they created artwork to display at COP26, to feature their voices and also, how the climate crisis is affecting them, because that's a very like underreported and appreciated like narrative in the climate justice movement, especially at COP26. Like there's barely so little indigenous voices there. Maybe just to stop there.
And okay, regarding to the question about the health environment, let me ask Nicole, is there really such a thing as the right to a healthy environment? Can you please tell us about that?
Only this year in October 8th, like the United Nations Human Rights Council actually passed a resolution like at an international level to recognize for the first time in history that access to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a fundamental human right. And that's what I mean when it's very important, because before this, people usually think, well, okay, environment is important, but no one and we know the climate activists know that it is a human right, but legally and like in what's happening in the world, like there's been not like any precedent to acknowledge that. And why this is important is because it's a global recognition, right? And it's a huge step, and because it helps empower like the local grassroots climate community, which is me and a lot of other people in Southeast Asia. It's almost like to give us like ammunition, or like helps us like give us like recognition to help us defend our livelihoods and health and culture against the ongoing environmental destruction. Like to say, you cannot do this, you cannot destroy a forest, because by doing so you are violating the communities who are living near the forest, their human rights or their rights to this clean, healthy, sustainable environment. And like when we can use this, we can use this kind of resolution as it's basically as an advocacy strategy. Advocacy strategy to not just say don't destroy that forest or ocean, but also to push for stronger and more like coherent environmental protection laws and policies in your country. Because every country already has environmental protection laws and policy. I'm sure everyone does. It's just that how often is it being enforced? When it comes, how often is it being enforced, and how often does your country or your government make decisions in the court in favor of protecting the environment and the communities who live there?
Okay, you also mentioned about the regulation, the advocacy to our country. And do you think how do you think our region is doing in terms of fulfilling their rights? What you see from the regions, maybe in Malaysia or in Southeast Asia itself?
I don't think anyone is doing a great job in terms of fulfilling that right. because like we still have okay, let me give you a few examples of why I don't think it's going right. Like, every day we still have a lot of land right violations, like a lot of deforestation. And in most of our countries, like the fossil fuel industry is so strong and it's holding us almost like in a chokehold, and they're still so dominant. Like I don't see us phasing out fossil fuels anytime soon. And we still have like in Malaysia so much like water pollution going unchecked, like, and just not just that, like imports of illegal plastic recycling being dumped into Malaysia. And also, I guess related to the outcomes from COP26, which is really disappointing. A lot of Southeast Asian countries also, and including Malaysia, have been like saying, yes, we're going to do net zero by 2050. And like that net zero is like, to me, it's not ambitious enough. It's more just like empty statements that governments keep saying just to like show that they are sort of doing work, but actually they're not, because there's no plan. There's no real plan, detailed plan on how they're planning to get there. And also net zero in itself as a concept is just like, it's a false solution in the sense of like, you can still continue polluting as long as you are so-called planting enough trees to remove the carbon. There's just no political will in my country and in a lot of countries. Like, I think a lot of a lot of our countries, in the name of development, we are always prioritizing profit and money over the health of like the people and the planet. But I do want to highlight some like bright spots, like good things about the region. I think we have like very, very, very strong and good network of like climate youth activists amongst the region, like not just here. I know, like, and we are strong in the sense of like we're starting to see the patterns of like, oh, here also like you've got coal mining in Malaysia and Indonesia, like, oh, and we're starting to see how some of our struggles are very interconnected. Oh, this is happening in your country too. Same, like how are you organizing around it? Like, let's share and see if we can find some like any like solutions or get ideas from how you are organizing and bring to my country. Yeah. And one country, Singapore, has declared a climate emergency. So that's a good thing out of all Southeast Asia. So maybe that's like maybe more countries can start to declare climate emergency. And one last good thing is that I think during the pandemic, I'm not exactly sure why, but the haze issue that is, affects a lot of Southeast Asia has kind of like lessened a lot more, even though it's not kind of like been 100% resolved, but that's a bright spot. Yeah. So just want to also highlight the bright spots. Yeah.
But Nicole, why do you think the young people should care about a healthy environment? What is the urgent things from this?
There's the first easy answer is that because it's our future, it's our life. Like, we are not separate from the environment. We are not separate from the environment. What we choose to do with the environment right now affects our future and our lives ahead and all the generations that come after us. And if I were to answer it in the point of like, when we talk about just now we were talking about right to healthy environment, right? And what is young people's like solution or role in that? And I was kind of talking a bit about the laws. Like I said, every country has laws, environmental laws, but the issue, especially in Malaysia, is about enforcement and whether countries and your governments are following through with their duty to protect you and also your right to the environment. Like if let's say pollution is happening in your community, actually you can hold your own government accountable to why this is happening, because they are violating your own, like I said earlier, right, your own human rights to a healthy environment by allowing that pollution, let's say by a factory in your area, to continue happening, and your health is being affected, and if you're sick you can't work, and then you fall into like a worse trap. Yeah, I guess I want to introduce this concept of like environmental litigation. which is basically when you're basically asking the government to, hey, please, like, this is the, let's say a river got polluted, and this is the damage it did to human health. Like, people went to hospital, people lost their jobs, like children had to like fainted, and things like that. Like, this is actually something that happened in Malaysia. And like when we talk about environmental litigation and how that can help people care and also realize a healthy environment, like you can use that as a tool, advocacy tool, to ask the government to be like, hey, this is what happened, these are the existing laws, what are the gaps? Like, hey, did this company or did this local government violate those existing laws? And like basically make a judgment outcome in the law, in the court, to say, hey, this is a violation of our human rights, and you need to like say that. Because when they say that in court, that helps make it easier for like civil society and activists like us to actually hold the companies and the government accountable for their actions. Yeah.
What are some of the ways you recommend, perhaps drawing on your experience, for young people who are just starting to adjust their lifestyle or start on their climate activism? Maybe you can start with simplest thing, or any other tips from you?
Yeah. You don't need to be an environmental science or climate expert to get into climate activism. Like, I really mean it when you can start with anything very small, or like something that's more internal. Like, I think people think like, oh, how do I be a climate activist? It's not about what you do outside, but it's like, it starts with the conversation that you're having with yourself internally. Because, okay, maybe to give you an example of how I got into activism, I got into activism a few years ago when I first noticed that I moved back to Malaysia after studying abroad, and I first noticed that the tong sampah, like the recycling, there's no recycling in Malaysia, and we don't separate our waste. Everything, we just like throw it all into the same bin. And I was like, this is not okay. Like, I'm wasting so many things that could be recycled. So I started my own zero waste initiatives, at home, in my own home, like got in, like made guides and like taught my family how to recycle and separate the waste, and put signs, and got them Tupperwares and asked them to bring it out to like buy food if they want to take bungkus takeaway. Then I began to expand that to the workplace, and I introduced the same kind of exact initiative. So I put recycling bins in our office, asked people to like separate the way that they throw away their rubbish, and also brought Tupperwares in, because where I work, there's like a lot of like, we go out to eat and take away a lot of food. And like it's just small initiatives, and I started it in my own home and workplace, but it helped like change. Like, I also did like some talks and like talks, because then it was in person, to educate people on why I started these initiatives. And that kind of like changed the culture around my family and workplace. It helped them think about waste, and it helped them think about, where does the waste go beyond our bin. That's what I mean by, you can start small by finding, your local climate grassroots organizations. I'm sure that every country in South Asia has them. Start volunteering with them, or go out to your community, talk to your community. Like let's say you have like fisher folk in your town. Talk to them and find out what issues they're facing. There's always an environmental issue around you, because we are part of the environment, and there's always an issue. It's just that whether or not you're paying attention to it.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicole, for the answer. And thank you so much, guys, for joining our interview session.